Hello, how's it going? I chose to review the US versus Madoff case. And basically, Bernie was a very well-known, highly connected individual that was able to pull off one of the largest Ponzi schemes, amounting to around $65 billion lost. And these funds came from investors that worked with him and invested in him, believing that he was able to give them back very high returns. However, he was just taking people's money and depositing it into his bank account, and whenever people asked for the money back, he would give them the money back, and with like profits, of course. But it was just a Ponzi scheme that he wasn't able to keep up if everyone decided to all pull out their money at the same time. And this multi-decade-long scheme supposedly started in the 1990s, and it lasted into 2008, during the recession when it all started to crumble, and he could no longer accommodate the redemption requests of people pulling the money out at the same time. There was a lot of panic during the recession, and investors got frightened and they wanted their returns, and he wasn't able to cough it up. About $7 billion they wanted, and he just didn't have it on hand. What I do find interesting is that years earlier, people were like smelling something fishy with him, and like whistleblowers or something, but not like official. But they submitted reports to the SEC and nothing came about of it. Nothing was done until eventually he turned himself in. And that's really when things started, and he got arrested in December the 11th of 2008. That's when he was charged for securities fraud. However, many people wonder why nothing was done earlier. Only when he turned himself in did he actually, get charged for this. Who knows how long it may have taken prosecutors to who knows how long the case would have taken if he didn't turn himself in. But supposedly he did so because it would look better on his case, and he might get less of a charge and still have some of his life to live out. However, that was not the case. He pleaded guilty to 11 counts of securities fraud, money laundering, and felonies from the Ponzi scheme. And on June 29, 2009, he was sentenced to 150 years, which is the maximum. And he was ordered to restitute $170 billion. However, the assets he had were nowhere close to that. So victims were harmed. They didn't get their money back. There was a MVF created in 2013 to distribute the funds that were forfeited. It's like a restitution fund. However, they were only able to get back a fraction of what they lost, unfortunately. But it's also just interesting how he was able to keep up the scheme for so long, because Supposedly he started back in the 70s, the 80s. He claims the 90s, but his clientele, the people that worked for him, they said the fraud has been around for as long as they can remember. And he's just always been doing that sort of thing. So who knows how long it's been going on. But on April 14th, 2021, Bernie finally died. He passed away after serving for 12 years. And many people are pretty upset about that because he lived a lavish billionaire lifestyle for decades on end off of stolen money. And he really didn't face much consequence, honestly. But despite the Ponzi scheme being over and him being dead, the consequences and actions of his work are still very well alive. Bernie was very influential, and he held titles such as the chairman of the NASDAQ. And it's interesting because he pioneered computer-driven order fulfillment, which is known as payment for order flow. And that's a way for market makers to outsource a task of finding orders to fulfill, which basically means that brokers are paying for people's orders. When you submit an order to the market, they receive that order before the actual market does, and they're able to use their high-powered computers to go and buy the stock and scoop it up right before you, milliseconds beforehand. And they're just like scraping pennies off the dollar and creating needless arbitrage and making millions off of it. Payment for order flow, invented or pioneered by him and implemented into the market. Madoff's name was actually so well known around the SEC offices that his efforts to give market makers exemptions from short selling restrictions led SEC officials to call the measure the Madoff exemption. So he took away market makers' restrictions and allowed them to pretty much short indefinitely and do a whole bunch of schmuckery, for such reasons as like it gives market makers liquidity as if they need that. But as we can see, Bernie's work still lives on and has a major impact on our market structure and the inner workings of the mechanics of the market. Overall, pretty awful changes for the investing public. But what can you do? Yeah.